Hi, it's Seta here. If in your game the player encounters a window for the first time, they will almost certainly walk up to it to check what they can see through it, whether it can be opened or whether the glass can be broken. If the player can't break the glass, they will assume that every other window works the same way and will treat it as a safe, transparent wall, even if a threat appears on the other side. Based on this one interaction, the player will build one of the Game Worlds rules, which they will remember for the rest of the gameplay. As a level designer, you can use this behavior to introduce several different window types, teaching the player how to recognize different windows and their properties. For example, standard windows can be breakable, while windows with metal grates can be armored and impossible to destroy. By applying this rule consistently, you can decide which windows act as a barrier and which ones can be broken, forcing the player to carefully observe the environment and judge whether a given space is safe. That's why, before you even start placing windows in your level, it is worth defining clear rules and asking yourself a few basic questions. Will the player be able to see anything through them? Will they be able to open it or break them? Can they pass through them? Does their appearance clearly communicate their properties? And what will the first interaction teach the player about the rules of the game world? And it is worth mentioning here that when I talk about windows, I don't just mean only regular glass window, but all openings like broken walls, cracks, air vents or any other visual opening that let the player look through them. From the player's point of view, they all do the same thing. They let you see another space without being able to fully go there. When it comes to regular window, their size and proportion have a huge impact on how the player perceives the environment. Large, tall or panoramic windows create a sense of monumentality and openness. They allow the player to see more space at once, making the scene feel larger and more significant. Medium-sized windows feel neutral. They allow observation without triggering strong emotions. Small or narrow windows limit visibility, which create tension, curiosity, and a sense of intimacy, because the player only sees a fragment of the space and has to feel the rest in their head. In this way, choosing the right size and proportion of windows becomes a powerful tool for shaping emotion and the player experience. A window is also a natural frame that automatically draws our attention. Our brain treats what we see inside a frame as more important than the surrounding space. This phenomenon is called the frame effect and works on a subconscious level. And just to be clear, don't confuse this with framing. That's a topic for a separate episode. At the same time, as I mentioned earlier, windows take advantage of our natural curiosity. If we can look through something, we want to do it. The desire to know what is on the other side is a fundamental human trait. So, a window showing something interesting, a mysterious object, movement or light, drives exploration purely through curiosity. What is also very important is how much information the windows provides, because that directly affects the player motivation. On one hand, you can use a window to show the players when they should go. On the other hand, you can place a window in that way that simply sparks curiosity. An object behind a window that doesn't clearly show how to reach it creates a desire to explore, because the brain dislikes unknowns and will try to resolve them. This psychological phenomenon is called information gap theory. When we know that we don't know something, we feel discomfort that can only be resolved by gaining the missing information. Windows also have a very strong impact on the player emotions, especially when they show a threat without allowing interaction. For example, the player sees a monster behind glass, and they know it can reach them, so they are temporarily safe. At the same time, they are aware that the threat is nearby and could strike at any moment. This contrast between safety and danger builds tension and increases the emotional intensity of the scene. It is worth mentioning here that windows are divided into windows on the critical path and optional windows. Critical windows are those that are placed directly on the player's main road and will almost certainly be noticed. If you are shown a monster, a location, or a missing objective through such a window, you can be sure that the information reaches the players. Optional windows, placed outside the main path, work in a more subtle way. Even if they don't lead to the new location or a secret, they often serve informational or visual purposes. They light the scene, close the composition, add depth to the space, or act as a visual boundaries of the map. So, if the player can look through them, make sure they don't see emptiness there. This is especially important in linear games because it helps avoid the feeling of corridor-like spaces and create an illusion that the environment is a part of a larger world. From the player's perspective, such windows are still a reward for curiosity. Even if there is nothing there mechanically, they gain the world context and better understanding of the environment. Windows can also act as an element that break monotony or introduce rhythm into repetitive spaces. Even one or two windows in a long straight corridor can reduce boredom, add depth, and make the player engage visually. That's why in corridors, windows often function as a subtle guidance tool, increasing spatial readability. They naturally attach the player gaze and suggesting movement direction. For example, a partially visible window at the end of the corridor suggests the presence of the further space, while a window placed in the middle may suggest a dead end. In rooms, however, it is worth considering windows placement in relation to the entrance. A window directly opposite the entrance immediately draws attention, which can pull focus away from the main objective that the player should notice. Of course, this can also be used in a way that makes the player, upon opening the door, look toward the windows because something interesting is happening there. Windows placed to the side of the entrance encourage to more natural reading of the room and do not distract the player. As a result, attention is focused on the key element on the scene and the windows serve as a subtle source of light instead of being the main thing that draws attention. But windows are not only tools for guiding the player and building curiosity. They are also the primary source of natural light and a key tool for creating mood. Light rays entering through windows create shadows, depth, and naturally guide the player's gaze. People follow light. This is one of the oldest tricks in level design. Place a bright window on the dark wall and the player will move toward it. Shine light on an object and the player will do the same. Windows are also a fundamental element of environment design that increase the credibility of the scene. Perfectly clean glass suggests that someone lives here. Completely broken frames with no glass suggest long-term destruction. Barricaded windows indicate danger, either from inside or outside. Each of those states immediately places the space in time. That's why, already at the level planning stage, it is worth treating windows not just a hole in the wall, but a storytelling tool. Their appearance, condition, and placement tell a micro-story of every space. But I will talk more about environment storytelling in one of the next video. And that's all for today. As a reminder, if you haven't seen the previous video of this series, be sure to check them out. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Until next time, see ya!